Earlier on, I spoke with the independent MEP for Ireland South, Michael McNamara. Michael is warning that rising costs and paywalled sport are driving more people towards so-called dodgy boxes, with an estimated 1 in 5 people in Ireland now using them. While acknowledging piracy is a serious issue, he says broadcasters and unfair subscription practices share the blame, and he's opposed to any move to fine users. Here's my chat with Michael. Good morning to you, Michael. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Alan.
You have warned that paywalled sport and unfair subscription practices are actually fueling the rise of the so-called dodgy boxes, and you've told the European Parliament that shared sporting moments are being lost. Why is that such an important issue, do you feel?
Well, I suppose why is the dodgy boxes? I suppose it's becoming increasingly prevalent in the news. It was listed for debate in the European Parliament last week, and we learned that there are proposals, at least, are to introduce administrative fines in Ireland, which would make it a lot easier to fine people for using dodgy boxes. Up to now, you have to be, if you were to be you would have to be brought to court and found guilty of having used them, and that is something that doesn't happen in Italy and I think Greece, and there's proposals in other European countries. They've introduced administrative fines so that if a dodgy box operator is busted, all of their customers, if they've got a customer database that's discovered, all of their customers sort of receive a fine in the post. Of course, they can go to court to dispute that, but that's a very sort of difficult process, going to court to dispute something. It's a bit like penalty points notices, I suppose, in the fixed penalty notices, rather, in the getting them in the post now. I mean, only a small proportion will go to court to dispute them. Why is it a problem? Well, I just think that sport is one of the things that. Why is it a problem that sport is put behind paywalls? I suppose I just think that. That sport is one of the things that brings communities together, that brings society together. I mean, if you remember, you may not remember, but I do, Euro 88 and Italia 90, when sort of Ireland were doing very well in football, and there was a sense of cohesion, and I think it gave Ireland, it was one of the things that helped kickstart the Celtic Tiger economy. It gave a newfound sense of confidence to Irish people that Ireland could compete on a world stage, and could compete successfully in a world stage, and that hadn't really been the case before, other than maybe in Eurovision or something like that. So I think these are important moments. I think more and more sport is being put behind a paywall. I mean, when I was growing up, there was something called Sports Stadium on RT, when like lots of different rugby, racing, soccer, like the top sort of league in British soccer, matches are being shown live, highlights, tennis when Wimbledon was on, and when the French Open was on, it was kind of, you'd walk down the street of any town in Ireland and you see kids out with tennis rackets because it was free to air. People were watching it on television. Now almost all sport is being put behind a paywall, and people, I suppose it means that people see a lot less sport. People are introduced to a lot less sport by that, and it means that they're spending more and more money to try to watch sport that 10 years ago they would have seen for free.
And a lot of fingers being pointed at those who are availing of the so-called dodgy boxes. But, as you say, live sport has become increasingly expensive to access legally. I know you've criticised the rolling contracts and lack of transparency, and perhaps you think the current subscription model for sport is broken. But I mean, how much responsibility do the broadcasters and rights holders bear for just pricing ordinary fans out, and having one subscription only covers a small bit of the sport you might want to see?
Exactly. I mean, I just think that's increasingly becoming part of the problem, that like they are getting more and more, like they are pricing their customers out of the market by having, as you said yourself, one subscription is no longer enough. You need multiple subscriptions if you're a football fan. If you're a sports fan, generally you need even more than that. Those subscriptions are becoming more expensive. And on top of that, some of the companies are sort of engaged in what I would consider to be dodgy practices themselves, like putting people on a contract. The contract starts at X amount of money and then it jumps up to Y, but then the contract never really ends. It just rolls over, so that they're never in a position to avail of new offers from the same company, because companies will offer offer new subscribers much more preferential prices than they're offering their existing ones, and making it difficult for people to leave and come back or to go on to a new contract. So, I mean, I just think all of that is fueling the problem. It's not just the dodgy box operators that are clearly acting unlawfully and illegally and taking advantage of the situation, effectively stealing copyrighted material. But it's not just that, it's those companies. And I suppose I would make the analogy, people might disagree, but like the government generally agrees that smoking is bad. Most people agree that smoking is bad. But when they're upping the tax on cigarettes every year, one thing they have to bear in mind is that they don't push people over the edge of just fueling smuggled cigarettes, that they, because there comes a tipping point at which it becomes much more attractive to take the risk of smuggling cigarettes, much more attractive to take the risk of buying smuggled cigarettes. And unfortunately, I think where the subscription companies are at now is very much at that tipping point.
Italy has moved towards fining dodgy box users. There's speculation that Ireland could follow suit. Is there a risk, though, Michael, that fining the users targets the symptom rather than the cause?
I think that's kind of very much where we're at. I mean, it would take a change to the law in Ireland to be able to fine users in Ireland, but undoubtedly that is being suggested, and I suppose some of the companies, the subscription companies, would like us to move in that direction. But I just don't think that we should be moving in that direction without looking at their practices as well and making sure that they're not contributing to the problem. Because I think that they're far from blameless in what's happening at the moment. Those companies themselves in how they're doing it. I mean, yes, I understand that when they say that nobody has a right to watch free sports, and of course that's true, but it is nevertheless, I think you have to look at what's good for society. I think it is good for society if people can watch sport. I mean, it's probably better for them than watching other things, and secondly, it can bring people together. But I just do think that these companies are making pretty large profits by any standards, and I think their practices are not above reproach, and I think they really need to look at what they're doing and the extent to which that's helping to fuel the problem. Okay,
so in terms of them looking at what they're doing and accepting that what they're doing, their model is leading to the situation we find ourselves in, and I know you're not a fan of administrative fines at EU level. If fines aren't the answer, what is? What changes would you like to see from broadcasters and regulators that might see people move away in greater numbers from using so-called dodgy boxes?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I think they really need to look at bundling and giving people bundles of subscriptions, and maybe people having a certain amount of credits that they could, get that they could have a certain amount of credits and be able to put those credits towards watching stuff that they want to watch, even if it's not on a channel that they routinely are subscribed to, instead of having to subscribe to a whole new channel because you want to watch one thing and maybe have a credit that would enable you to watch something on it. So that, because I think part of what's attractive about dodgy boxes, of course, it's undoubtedly the much lower price, and I mean that, let's be honest, is possible to do partly because they're not paying any fees to the rights holders themselves. But I mean, part of what it is that it's one payment, and you know what it is, and it's paid, and that's it. And that is, I suppose, something I think that they need to look at. The other thing is, I mean, I suppose the whole model where footballers are being transferred for tens, if not hundreds of millions of euros now, is largely paid for by television rights, which in turn is largely paid for by ordinary subscribers. I mean, people start to say, well, how can that be feasible or sustainable where footballers are being transferred for the amount of money that they are now, compared to great footballers in the 1980s were making a good living, but not much more than that. And what's brought all this about? Well, it is this sort of television rights and the growth of television rights. I suppose the entertainment industry, football has moved really from becoming a sport to being part of the entertainment industry, and you'd wonder, there probably is a tipping point though, at which it no longer becomes sustainable. But I suppose you'd have to. I think the question is is it good for society that football just becomes entertainment rather than a sport? I mean, I would hate to see the GAA go down the same path.
It's going to be interesting to see where things go, but we do have to leave it there for the moment. The Ireland South Independent MEP, Michael McNamara, thank you for joining us on Morning Focus.
Thanks very much, Alan.